I'm Jake Boudrot, Civic Journalist at Community Television. With me today is the interim leader of the Nova Scotia Liberal Party, Sydney-Membertou MLA, Derek Mombourquette. Welcome.
Hey, Michael, thanks for having me.
So on December 10th, former Yarmouth MLA Zach Churchill announced that after 14 years in politics, he was stepping down as Liberal leader, and you were named interim leader with a focus on rebuilding the party and advocating for Nova Scotians. At the same time, Timberley Prospect MLA and former Premier Ian Rankin will serve as House Leader for the Liberals. According to a statement from the Liberals, you and Rankin have both agreed to serve as interim leader until a leadership race is held, splitting your time evenly. How will this work? Can it be called a power sharing arrangement, or are you the main leader in this scenario?
So right now I'm the interim leader, and where Ian and I are a caucus of two at this point right now, we thought it was in the best interest really that we would share the duties. So I will take the role for now, with a focus, of course, on rebuilding the party and working closely with Ian on the decisions that we want to make moving forward to engage the membership, but also prepare for an eventual host sitting and make sure that we're prepared on the policy front, looking at what we want to bring forward as a caucus, some of the strategies that we're going to be working on around that. So we're going to share all of the duties at some point. We've been going through the process of selecting the critical roles between the two of us for various departments. So I have it now for the next year, and then we'll see. Ian will take over, and then eventually the party has to come to a decision on when they'll hold an official leadership race. And then from there, when there's a new leader, the new leader will determine what the next steps are going to be.
Now, you just mentioned that about a leadership race. Do you have any loose estimate on when that might start, or when that process is going to take place?
Well, it won't happen overnight. The recommendation that we gave and that I gave was that we need some time to engage after the election. Of course, we have a lot of work to do, a lot of conversations and information to gather, talking to candidates and riding associations across the province to hear from them firsthand, their experience during the campaign. So I suspect it won't be in the first year for sure. I would say, and again, this is something that the party would have to decide. I would suspect it would be within the first 2 years of the mandate.
So you said you're going to be speaking with some riding associations and stuff like that. Are you also going to be speaking with some of the candidates who lost and other people outside of those riding associations?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So a big step of it, of course, is that we're going to reach out to the candidates, and I've had the opportunity to speak to many of them. We met as a group just after the election in Halifax, and we heard a bit. But my goal over the holidays, of course, and moving into the new year, is to reach out to all of them, have a conversation with them, have a conversation with the riding associations, then eventually get on the road into these communities, not only to speak with the folks that were engaged with the campaign, but other folks across communities who have reached out to me since I've become leader to say that they want to help. There's lots of support out there, and there's lots of people that see this opportunity almost as a blank canvas, where we're rewriting the narrative of the Liberal Party here in Nova Scotia.
Is some of that fueled by the worry that the party is on the brink of dying out? I don't know how else to put that, and people are kind of scared at that prospect?
Well, I don't think the party's dying out. So we had a tough election. Let's call it what it is. We have 2 members left. We had a number of close elections that took place. We had a number of recounts that took place that didn't go our way. And when you look overall with the popular vote across the province, we were actually in second. So there's lots of support that's there, but we have a lot of work to do. So people have reached out, as I've said, across the province and across the island to congratulate me in the new role and to offer help. So I've seen parties go through this before. I've watched this with the Conservatives 10 years ago, where they're going the back end of a federal government and their mandate, and you're looking at it was a difficult time for them. So we're in that cycle right now where we put forward a good platform. We put forward some good ideas that would help people every day. But at the end of the day, Nova Scotians decided who they wanted in government, and I respect that, and I congratulate the government for their win. I congratulate my colleagues from the NDP for a hard-fought race. Now for us, we're into the rebuild. So for me, I find it's tough, but it's also exciting because, as I said, we have a chance now to really rewrite the narrative for the Nova Scotia Liberal Party. What do we believe and what do we stand for, and how can we bring as many people into the Liberal family as possible?
Now, I don't know if I'm reading this incorrectly or not, but it seems that there was a lot of Liberal-leaning or traditional Liberal voters that likely voted Progressive Conservative in this last provincial election. If you look at the results, even from Richmond alone, the Liberal candidate lost about 800 votes from that the previous Liberal candidate got in the 2021 election, and the Progressive Conservatives gained almost the exact same numbers what the Liberals lost. So it looks like there are some Liberal voters or people who should or could be voting Liberal who voted for someone else, and then there's a whole bunch of Nova Scotians that just stayed home when you look at the voter turnout as well.
Yeah, and that's a challenge, regardless of a concern more than a challenge, regardless of what party wins, is that there's always concern of voter turnout, and it was sporadic all over the province, where you've seen, the overall turnout was one of the lowest in history, if not the lowest. You see certain ridings where the turnout was very low, and some that were consistent. So you want people to have the ability to vote. Not having the voter information cards is something that you hear from residents, and obviously that couldn't happen at the time to get them out. But it's always a concern for me, regardless of political stripe, when you see the numbers that low. And to your point around people changing their minds and voting Conservative, yeah, of course you've seen some of that. I've even seen some of that in my own riding. You were in an election where people had some concerns around not only the party provincially but federally, and they were making their decisions based on that, on who they wanted to vote for. And you can't take away from candidates on the ground either. Like we ran a slate of really strong candidates, so did the PCs. And in the case of Cape Breton, you had a lot of incumbents that were back in the race, and some new faces that were strong in their communities, and I congratulate them. It's as I said, I've seen this happen multiple times with multiple parties. You can go back as far as the Dexter NDP. They came in on a wave, and then a term later they were replaced by the Liberals. And we had our two majority governments during my time and as a minister in McNeil and Rankin's cabinets, and now you're into the cycle with the PCs. So the PCs have now won a second mandate, and now for us it's going to be okay, so how do we rebuild from this point?
Now, you referred to the voter information cards that were not sent out by Elections of Nova Scotia. And I know when I spoke with the NDP leader, now the leader of the official opposition, Claudia Chender, she raised some concerns with that and thought that it, as well as changing polling stations and things of that nature, and she has some grave concerns about what happened in the lead up to the election. Do you share those concerns?
Yeah, I do. I do share those concerns. We heard local reports on the ground here from residents in Sydney who we know didn't vote. We know that many went to a polling station and were sent to an additional polling station because that polling station was not where they were supposed to go. And we've heard stories of where people went to multiple polling stations. So I question how many people, and I don't have the data on it, but you wonder how many people didn't vote at all because of that. Those voter information cards are key. I really wish that they would have got out for everyone to start, regardless of who people support. You want people to get information, and that became a big part of our campaign here in Sydney. Was how do we determine or how do we get information to people about where to go? You had the issue on election day where the site crashed, where we were directing people to the Elections Nova Scotia site, where the site actually crashed, and people for the first hour plus, our office was flooded because people didn't realize where to go, or they couldn't access the information. So there's going to be some conversations around that as we move forward, it was a concern for all of us, and ultimately, regardless of election results and who won and who formed government, the bigger issue is that people didn't have the information to cast their ballot, and you know, you never want that scenario. So we'll ask those questions about why the voter information cards weren't sent. For me, one question is if they were prepared to go. I think those questions I'll be asking if I get the opportunity to do it. I should be able to, along with Ms. Chender. But that would be the one thing with this campaign. You never want to see your voter turnout that low, and you never want to see people have to scramble to find out where to vote. Everybody did their best to get that information to people, but we know on the ground, just through the stories that we're hearing, that many people didn't.
Now, you alluded earlier to the federal Liberals and particularly Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, and there seemed to be a lot of unpopularity around that. How big a factor did that play in the result from November 26th?
So I go to Sydney, and in Sydney it was you hear it regardless, right? You're going to hear, like I used the example previously that I was a cabinet minister at the time, and I'm in the government side watching this happen with the PCs 10 years ago, right? And you see a federal government on the back end of their mandate where people are ready for change ultimately, and this is unscientific, but prime ministers hit that 10-year mark where people are ready to say, okay, it's time, and that's consistent regardless of political party. Stephen Harper was there for 10 years before people were ready to make a change, and I think that's where the government federally is finding itself, is that people are looking at their options, and I call it the natural cycle of politics. So does it play a part? Of course it plays a part. It always plays a part. In Sydney, not as much. Although I've been in the MLA now here for 10 years, so I'm running a bit on my own personal record here in the community, but it plays a factor. It always does. And for us, we have a caucus of 2 right now, so I haven't had the ability to sit down with the candidates or the EDAs and say how much of an impact did it have or did it not have. But obviously people made a decision in this provincial election, so I would argue that it would have played some sort of impact, but similar to what it would have done 10 years ago under the Conservatives.
So as you know, on election night, your party came away with 2 seats, with the Progressive Conservatives winning an historic 43, and the NDP becoming the official opposition, taking over from the Liberals with 9 seats. In the local ridings of Richmond and Inverness, the Liberal candidates finished a distant second in those cases. With only 2 seats, how do you plan on holding this government to account?
Well, I'm fortunate because I'm sitting with a former premier myself, with Ian, and I had the privilege of being a minister under his government. And we both of us are 2 of the longest serving members in the legislature, and I think we're going to do an excellent job of holding the government to account. We're going through that process now of kind of the strategy, what we want to look at moving forward as we move into the House. They haven't really made any. They made one decision around the HST, which is something that we also campaigned on. So they made that decision. We'll see what moves they're going to make moving forward, and we're going to see how much capacity they have to make those moves, and that's something that for me I'll be watching, is their ability to pay. And you're starting to see these large deficits come out of Ottawa when it comes to their capacity. And the one thing that the Progressive Conservatives have been very beneficial of is substantially large federal transfers have been coming to Nova Scotia since the PCs have formed government, the largest in history. So you're talking billions of dollars that the government had access to try to support healthcare and to try to support a whole number of initiatives that they have been able to use that federal money to help pay for, which is ironic because they really ran a campaign against the federal government for the most part. when they were receiving the largest federal transfers in history. So my question becomes is what does the future look like? And their ability to pay, and what happens if those transfers are gone? And I think nobody's really talking about that yet. You won't see the impact of that right away, but it's something in my mind that I'm looking at going, they've made a number of commitments, but also a number of programs that as a government we started and we've advocated for around kids, around childcare, around some other important supports for families. And what I'll be watching is, what kind of moves they make, what kind of financial capacity they're going to have, and of course keep them to account on the important, a lot of the important issues. It's cost of living is very difficult for people. We hear that a lot in our office. Healthcare will always be at the top of the agenda when it comes to ensuring that we fight and we advocate for whatever we can for healthcare across the island, and housing. Housing's a big one too as well, and people just classify the housing issue as in the bigger urban areas, but it's actually not. It's all over the province. So Ian and I have a lot of experience, and I think people will see a strong stance from me and him when it comes to not only holding him to account, but it's also about being constructive about it and saying, okay, this is what we think you can do around housing. This is what we think you can do around healthcare, because I think that's what people want to see too. I think people are getting tired of seeing politicians just go at each other all of the time, right? So like we'll fight the fight for Cape Breton and for the rest of the province, but also we're going to bring some tangible things forward that I think can help.
Now, you mentioned this about the possibility of this province hitting the fiscal wall if transfer payments are decreased from Ottawa, but the prospect of a Conservative government where the leader of the Conservatives has publicly discussed making cuts to spending, that could also compound this fiscal wall that you're talking about.
Well, that's it, and again, like this is a topic that people are starting to pay attention to, and they really started paying attention here in the community when the fiscal update came out from the feds last week, where they saw a deficit of over $60 billion. And people will debate why that is, and there's good programs within that. And I've worked with the federal government on childcare. I've worked with the federal government on other initiatives around energy, and so there's good people there. But like when you look at the capacity, and you're absolutely right, when Poilievre starts talking about cutting, what does that mean? What does that mean for the relationship for Nova Scotia with Ottawa? What does that mean in terms of resources that the Houston government's going to have moving forward? And I think that is a big question mark that we won't find the answer to, because we don't know ultimately who will win the next federal election. But regardless, I think there's going to be capacity issues there. You hear a lot of conversation around tariffs, and the feds and the provinces are rallying together to try to determine what that roadmap looks like in dealing with the states. You're looking at changes to other impacts around immigration, which ultimately also impact revenue. So all of these things are stuff that I kind of watch, and I say to myself, you won't see it today, but down the road, what is the capacity for the province to continue to spend the way they're spending? Is that capacity going to be there? Because they're in debt. Now, I haven't seen the fiscal update from today yet. I haven't talked to the staff, but I'm in Sydney. But they were running deficits before Tim Houston, so he was actually consistently overspending. People argue the federal government's overspending, so is he, right? So what is that going to look like moving forward? That's going to be a big question mark for me.
Yeah, and that brings me to my next question. By the time the next provincial election rolls around, things could conceivably look a lot different than they are now. Could have Conservatives in power in Ottawa, and if gains aren't made by the provincial government in healthcare, because that was, let's face it, one of the main reasons why Tim Houston was elected for the first time in 2021 was on the promise to fix healthcare, and it's conceivable that by the time of the next election, things could look quite different in Nova Scotia.
Well, so I can say at a local level, if you hear the stories from residents that are going to emergency rooms for support, it's not any better. You talk about the need of family practice, the wait list. That wait list is north of 140,000. Tim Houston called it a crisis when it was under 70 when we were in government. So government's, he's got a lot of work to do with that. You're going to start seeing some of the important medical infrastructure here in Cape Breton possibly come online in this mandate with the new cancer center and stuff, because those timelines are into the 2027, 2028 range. So you'll see some new services come forward. You'll see some new supports for families here on the island and mainland Nova Scotia that they can access. But ultimately, Houston has a new mandate, and what's interesting is that he's also distanced himself from Poilievre. If you notice that in the campaign, Tim Houston came out and he doesn't support Poilievre either. So he distanced himself from Trudeau. But and there was one of the major media, I think one of them talked about this, and he actually came out and said the progressive conservative government has no connection to the conservatives. So he wanted to distance himself from Poilievre. So it's going to be interesting to watch, because I don't know what that relationship would be like, even if the federal conservatives ended up forming government, because one of the first things that Tim Houston did during this campaign was distance himself from Poilievre.
Yes, and a number of the public opinion polls taken before the election showed that even people with negative impressions or unfavorable impressions of Pierre Poilievre ended up voting progressive conservative. So there seems to be a number of people in that PC coalition right now who really aren't fans, I guess, of Poilievre.
Yeah, I heard that in Sydney. So I got a lot of that in Sydney, because you asked me the question around, or are people, are they concerned about the federal Liberals? Of course there are, folks. We've seen that in some of the results. You can't avoid it. But I also heard just as much about Poilievre. So people are concerned that many of the important institutions that have been part of our Canadian fabric for generations may be gone. He's talking about cutting, major programs. What does that look like for $10 a day childcare? That's something that I was proud to be part of. We know that not only will childcare fees go to an average of $10 a day in 2025, but it also brought wage increases for early childhood workers, pensions, and other supports. So those are concerns for people, and you hear that. I heard that on the doors too as well. But what I find interesting is that you have a provincial government that ran a campaign against Justin Trudeau, but also distanced himself from Pierre Poilievre. So that's the political side of it. But the bigger issue for me, which I believe nobody's really talking a lot about, but they're going to start, is the capacity to pay. And that's going to be the big one for me, is that what does 12 to 18 months look like if there is a change in government in Ottawa? What moves does the new government make, which reduces the capacity for those billions of dollars that Tim Houston received over the years, that he was quick to criticize the federal government, but they were giving him all of this money, but he never wanted anybody to know that a lot of the health transfers and everything else increased, which he was using himself and his government to make investments, but also run deficits. So it's going to be a very interesting time in politics for the next number of years.
Yeah, and getting back to what you were saying earlier about you want to go around the province and talk to Nova Scotians, talk to Liberals. What is the message you're bringing, or is it mainly that you're just there to listen and hear what they have to say?
Well, I think the first part of it is listening, of course. In any kind of leadership role, like the wonderful people across the province put their name on a ballot for our party, and wonderful people put their names on the ballot for all the parties. But I specifically talk about the Liberals. So a lot of good people stepped up. It is a big commitment to make personally, and your family's involved, and your community's involved, and as someone, I ran in 2013 and it wasn't successful in my first one. So I want to go out and listen to them. I want to hear their experience. We take all of that and we use it. We use it to make sure that we look at the strategy. We find out obviously what went wrong, what people were hearing, and then after I do that, it would actually be interesting to come back and have another interview with you, because then I would be through that and I could give you the information about what people were saying. But it's also about So there's that side of it, but it's also about as well engaging not only our candidates, but Nova Scotians. So as I said, I'm excited. I have been contacted by folks not only across the island and the province, but across the country to say, hey, Derek, like, congratulations. We're here to help. And people see the opportunity of this blank canvas that is in front of us that says, okay, here we are. There's nowhere to go but up at this point. What do we want to define this party as moving forward? And it's going to be a lot of work, but I'm honored to have the opportunity to do it.
Well, I'm sure our viewers would be interested in hearing what
Yeah, for
people
sure.
had to say, and I'll take you up on that offer for sure in the new year, and we can reconnect again and have a discussion about that. But in the meantime, I really appreciate you taking time out of what I'm sure is a busy schedule to speak with me and our viewers. Thank you very much.
Thanks, man. I appreciate the opportunity to be on here.